Welcome back to the episode of Spectator Mode. I'm Neil Strebig. With me, as always, is Donald Double D. DeCray.
I'm never gonna escape that.
So, now we missed last week. Thankfully, Double D has recovered from the good old vid.
Yeah, first time in what has it been? 2 years now, 3 years that we've been dealing with the COVID, and this is the first time I've ever gotten sick with it. So
Hey, Christ, it has almost been 3 years. Fuck.
no, so I feel like I did a relatively good job in the scheme of things. I did my best, guys, but finally my bad ways caught up with me. I guess took me out for a while. Speaking was not easy, and just existing for a minute. But we're past it, and we're back, and that's all that matters.
Glad you're feeling better. You look better.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, so that's good, man. It is good. But no, we got a pretty wide range of topics, honestly. Now that I kind of look at the list. We talk a little bit about Nintendo and some new news there on the Nintendoverse, so to speak. We're going to talk a little bit about Last of Us. Some pretty big news. I should say pretty big news. Some trendy news from Naughty Dog, I should say. We talk a little about some toxicity from the fan base, especially from, I think, everybody's favorite nerdum actor, Simon Pegg.
Yeah, right.
And we talk about one of your favorite games out right now, Stray.
And I guess it's one of my favorites, yeah.
And then we'll talk about a little about a new documentary coming out from HBO about life in VR. Kind of jump into it. Nintendo, so they just bought Dynamo, which is a CG motion capture animation studio, and deal will close in October as long as everything goes through. And essentially, it's Nintendo then shifting to Nintendo Pictures and hinting at they're going to make a Nintendo universe, cinematic universe of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I think we've been seeing kind of like what's the next big thing after superheroes. I think a lot of people are having fatigue at this point with all the Marvel content, because now it's not just the movies, it's the shows on top of it. Superhero fatigue. DC's obviously thrown their hat in the ring, so to speak. They've got a whole host of shows as well, and TV releases, Arrow, Flash, etc. I think it's shifting to what's the next thing. What is the next focus for IPs to develop? And it feels like it might be video game titles. And we've had a lot of conversations about this on this actual show, right? So I guess the question to you is, if Nintendo's going the route of adapting their games into shows and movies, which games do you think would lend themselves to that format?
Well, one, I think the success of it all depends on how the Mario movie with Chris Pratt comes out. Because a lot of their titles, naturally, you can make pretty much all their titles into a kids movie of some sort, I think. So it's very kid friendly. Now, if they want to tap in more of the audience, I do think naturally Legend of Zelda, that's a huge one to where you can go a lot of different ways with that. To make an anime, you can make it more of an adult anime as well. But again, I'm not sure how adult Nintendo's going to get, even in the cinematic universe. Even they have some titles, I think that kind of could push it. Like F-Zero, I would love to see like a live action F-Zero, and kind of the grungy bounty hunters forced to kind of race, save their lives kind of shit. And even there's a lot you can flesh out because the storyline's very loose. So you really could kind of make it a death race kind of thing. And I think that would be a blast to see. We haven't seen a new F-Zero game in ages. Metroid's the same kind of thing too, to where you could really make that an awesome sci-fi horror kind of movie, TV series. A lot of different angles you can go with that. Even the Metroid Federation as well.
Yeah, and I think Nintendo, of a lot of the game companies we've looked at before, is maybe in a better position for this, because one of the things we talked about is a lot of games have sort of a cinematic, immersive experience, right? We've talked about God of War being an example of that, of like the game itself plays like a story of which you are a part. And how do you then take something that's a story that you've already experienced and bring it into the big screen while still keeping it fresh and new, and not just basically rehashing old content that people have already seen and experienced, probably in a more personal way because they've played through it in the game format. You know what I mean? Nintendo, for their part, a lot of their games, I think, are very story light. It's not that there's no story, but there's not so much there that I think in their case, they do not run the risk of retelling things that we've already experienced in the games. You know what I mean? So I think there is a lot they can play with their titles and adapting them and what they could do with them and stuff. So I think it's an interesting move, a good move. I also think this brings into question maybe what their plans are in the future, because Nintendo, I think, tends to push the frontier a little bit with their consoles and what their consoles are capable of doing. So I wonder if this will tie into any future gaming projects they may make with moves to VR and stuff like that. I don't know, but at least on the TV movie front, I think this is a positive move overall, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of the studio.
Any particular titles you want to see adapted?
I think I would really like a Donkey Kong movie. I'm not gonna lie. Just watching DK get out there and go ham with it, be cheesy. You know, I mean, it's definitely gonna be a kids movie. I don't try to adult it up or something like that. Just like go ham with the cheesiness and over the topness. I think would be a lot of fun. And like my fiance makes fun of me all the time because I get
you
it.
don't want to see a live action Lion King version of DK.
Oh no. Keep it animated, keep it fun and light and cartoony, and like, you know. My fiance makes fun of me because she's like, you're going to be in there with all the movies with the kids and you're going to actually want to watch them. And I'm like, that's completely true. So I would definitely dig on something like that. But what else you got for us today?
Moving on to a bit more critical kind of takes, though. Still somewhat kind of in the movie realm, considering Last of Us have a TV show coming to HBO soon. But one of the animators for Last of Us with Naughty Dog Productions, Robert Morrison, basically came out and said after some fans were tweeting that the new Last of Us remaster is a cash grab. It's like, it's not a cash grab. It's one of like the most dedicated, detailed projects I've ever worked on. You buying that?
I don't know. I think it's difficult to say at this stage of things because, like, on the one hand, I think there's a lot of titles that can just benefit from updated graphics and stuff like that. Like the core gameplay is solid. And I think speaking of like Nintendo is a great example of a company that has very simple core gameplay, which is still engaging and fun. You know what I mean? Like you can go back to Super Mario Brothers and enjoy that, even though the graphics are what they are. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know that it's necessarily a cash grab to update a game that has solid gameplay, solid story, and that people genuinely enjoy. And it does not sound like they're adding any new monetization to it. I think that needs to be pointed out as well. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're saying like, oh, there's unlockable weapons or other things that you can pay for. So I don't know. I kind of feel like this is probably just fine, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you make some good points there. And to be fair with monetization and just kind of updating games, like, does it pass the litmus test for a cash grab? Maybe by definition, maybe not because of monetization points, which is an excellent point. I still disagree. I think it is because you remastered so many times in such a short span, and the TV shows around the corner. So it's again like, it's not like these things develop overnight or relatively quick. They're in discussion. It's a whole marketing team that goes around into how you're going to pitch the movie and stuff too. You can't tell me that another remaster of Last of Us wasn't on the table there. And I wouldn't be as upset if, again, like I just played the remastered version, the first one they did last winter.
Yeah, I guess it was.
It was fine on the PS4, and like I don't think it needed another one. And again, update the details and improve graphics. I get it, but it wasn't like killing my eyes to play.
Very interesting. I mean, and I think to your point, the article, that we've seen on this talks about how there was not crunch required to finish this, which means that they were able to work at, whatever an average pace would be, which definitely implies either that there was not much to do or to be done, or like you said, that this was something that was in the pipeline for a long time. They were aware of this coming down, and like, this wasn't just like a last minute decision. This was something that was discussed and planned and maybe intended to be part of the Last of Us, franchise that's now expanding and everything else, which definitely casts it in a different light from that perspective of this is much more considered, much more purposeful, and makes it look more like a goal. The main goal is to ramp up hype for the show. Fair takes or not, Simon Pegg has come out and he was asked in an interview what he considers to be the most toxic fandom. And I'll just read the quote straight up because I think it's pretty interesting by itself. But according to Simon Pegg, quote, "To be honest, and as someone who kind of was, kicked off about the prequels when they came out, the Star Wars fan base really seems to be the most kind of toxic at the moment." I'm probably being very controversial to say that. So he does hedge it a little bit, I guess. But I guess it's an interesting take because we've talked about toxic fandoms in the past on the show and how fans have kind of almost a sense of entitlement, right? With with their franchise and what happens with it, how it's developed in other projects and stuff like that. And I'm curious, do you think, number one, do you agree that of all the fandoms, is Star Wars the worst? And number two, do you think this is a real issue that deserves more attention?
Oh, I mean, yeah, toxicity is 100% a serious issue in nerdom. I mean, again, we talk about it far too often. I think just on sheer volume on how much we talk about it, indirectly at times, is covering moments of it. I think that proves this point of like, yes, it's very apparent, and it's only gotten worse. I think because you have divisions of new fans versus old fans, the tried and true like defending your honor, your fandom, and it's just again like people feel so closely tied to some of these titles, they take it as a personal attack, and it's like take a step back. We all digest it differently. We all have different takes, and if you take it personal, then maybe you aren't mature enough to have a conversation in an open forum. So maybe just don't put yourself out there like that. You know?
That's an interesting take. Just stay home in your sandbox, I guess, and kick sand if you can't be mature about it.
It is what it is. And again, because it's not, I can't tell you how many times I've offended people just because I have thought out takes on, Harry Potter or fucking Star Wars or, the MCU. And just because it's different and usually critical, people take it as I'm like pissing on their fucking dog and burning their house down. It's just like, I love this shit too, but I also can be critical of it and like analyze it. That's kind of what I've done. It's what we do on the show. And it's like, that's how our friendship started with shit like that. I mean, of like talking about it.
Yeah.
And, again, we were, teenagers in our young 20s. And it's just like, we didn't bicker or get pissy pants about it. We just talked about it. So I do think there is a realm of maturity that needs to be there. But as far as most toxic fandom,
yeah, that's what I'm curious where you come down on that.
It's a tough one. I'd really have to kind of go through and do more of a case study, but I do think Star Wars, you can definitely make the case for. I see Simon Pegg's bit on Star Trek because I don't really know too many Trekkies that really get bent out of shape.
Right, and for reference, in the same interview,
versus Star
Pegg makes
Wars
the point that Trek fans tend to be very inclusive and more relaxed about these things because Star Trek from inception was about inclusivity. So they seem, in his perception at least, to be more relaxed about these types of things.
I mean, I think Star Wars, with how much stuff's going out there, it's maybe low-hanging fruit because there's just so much, and you have 3 different generations of fans to where it's easy to sift through. You just think about some of the new titles coming out, and it's like people always have criticism to it, like the whole Tatooine thing. And to me, I think some of Star Wars toxicity is rooted in like not understanding Star Wars in some capacities. And trying to make it more than what it is sometimes, or ignoring the fact that like you're going to keep being on Tatooine because we're going back to characters that found there. And unfortunately, that's the planet a lot of things are tied to. And you need some sort of stability to connect some of those dots and then to, set up a platform for new shows that can now branch out to other worlds. Like you need to start somewhere, and that's the somewhere. And I don't know why fans get so bent out of shape with that, which, kind of shocks me there. But I do think World of Warcraft,
interesting,
very toxic environment, and that's one I definitely had to go through.
No, I think that's a really good point in terms of like what other fandoms might be toxic. And like I think the first thing is we should make a clarification of like what is toxic in our opinion, right? And for me, I agree with you that there is fair criticism which can be levied at things, looking at constructively like what could be better, what could be changed, or just looking at it in an analytical or academic fashion almost, and having those conversations respectfully. I think it crosses into toxicity when it's, just emotional vitriol, it's hate, it's getting on actors' personal lives and stuff like that. And we've seen that. We've seen attacks, like personal attacks on actors who played a character. And because people don't like the character, they're coming after the actor. And it's like, the actor is really one small part of what you end up seeing on screen for any given character. The writers, the directors, and all that goes into what you end up seeing and the portrayal that comes through. So, you can dislike the character, but it's very different when you start bringing that home to the actor. And I think Star Wars, maybe of most franchises, I think has been the worst about that, with really just going in on the actors themselves in like a big way. And I still remember everything around Jar Jar Binks and how people went in on, what was the actor's name? Ahmed Best or something like that, right?
I'm not sure that.
People just really tore him down because they were not a
suicide,
fan.
Yeah, which is crazy.
I mean, and it was horrible, right? Like, it was absolutely horrible how people like dove in on him on a personal level, and he's like, "This is a voice I did for my kid. My kid found it funny. The director thought it was funny. Like, this wasn't like me trying to be racist, essentially." And if you've seen interviews with the actor in person, like, he doesn't talk like that typically. You know what I mean?
I hope not. Yeah.
No, but and like it was completely done at the direction of other people. That's what they wanted from him, and he delivered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's interesting you point out World of Warcraft fans as being toxic because I think they're very unwelcoming to beginning players. The expectation of like know the dungeons, know the routes, know, you know, the optimum way to move through and stuff like that, or like the optimum builds and yada yada. Like it's very elitist at this point in like a bad way. I think I'd throw in two other franchises for that. I'd throw in League of Legends has similar, it's never my fault, it's always somebody else's kind of attitude flaming in it. And then another toxic franchise might be Game of Thrones, which like at this point I think they get off more on hating on the series and the show in particular than the actual than like loving on something that drew them together in the first place. You know what I mean?
No, it's a fair one, and I think again, like Game of Thrones is a perfect example though too of people taking it too personal and not really having, I think, the conversation themselves of like, okay, something I really enjoy and look forward to is coming to an end, and I do think that's where that visceral, just immediate, and in my opinion, I think it's immature. People just feel like I'm being attacked, like oh my god, it's like the soul crushing thing. It's just like it's a fucking TV show you watch for entertainment, okay? And if you also couldn't like get behind the fact that that's probably the last time in like human existence that we're going to be watching the same fucking thing at one moment in time, well, like you missed it. Okay. You're too busy getting mad because the darkest episode called The Darkest Fucking Night was filmed extremely dark for a fucking reason. Why you watch Game of Thrones? Your fucking lights on. Like, noob, get out of here.
That's
But
crazy.
now I'm being toxic.
I mean, you know what I mean? It happens. I guess it happens. And so, talking about fans and going off of that a little bit, I'm going to move over to Stray was released on Steam, PlayStation. It's still free to grab on PlayStation Plus, which is incredible. And we mentioned this title a little bit back because I said that they had a very good kind of viral marketing campaign. It went big on Reddit for a while and stuff. And you're literally just playing as a stray cat, roaming the streets and having adventures. I have not bought this game yet because I tend not to buy things unless there's a sale. I tend to be a little more patient on these things. But they're already setting records on Steam. They've been one of like the top 20 games for concurrent users a time. But yeah, it's been crazy, the reception for it. And the question comes, which I asked before, is did they make a mistake going free on PlayStation Plus? What do you think?
No, I'm going to say no on this because, and this might be again something unique because so many people are playing it right away. It seems like the people that enjoy it, if they do monetize or get any DLC, are going to go bananas over it then. And I'm saying that strictly just because the fandom seems to just love the game. So it seems like they could do a lot more with it then. And that's a very subjective thing. I don't know if I would have said, going free at launch would have been the best move for any game because, we talked about what happened to Oddworld Soulstorm.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it seems like people just really like the relaxing game and are enjoying it. And it's one of those things to where I think people want to kind of be a cat then and that whole love. So it's like if you can put a weird outfit on a cat or, do something stupid or be, find a cat bodega to hang in. I don't know. Like, I don't know the games. I don't know the layout of like where you can explore and stuff, but I think any elements like that to where you can monetize it and create these personalized people will be all over that for sure. Like catnip.
Yeah. I mean, like it's currently still in the top 20 for current users, current players. It's beating out titles like Stardew Valley and Terraria, which I think is how this game might go. It might find that niche of players who just like the game as a nice change of pace. You know what I mean? Like I haven't played it myself as well, but from what I've seen from video and stuff like that, it's a much more relaxing game. You're playing this cat. There's some drama of like not getting caught and stuff like that. But like for the most part, I think it's more of a step back, slow down, kind of appreciate it is what it seems like. And if it is able to go the way of Stardew Valley, and similar games, I think it'll have a great niche for itself where it can live. And you're right. I mean, the potential for future DLC and monetization options is there. I don't know. It seems like it's doing very well on Steam. And I guess the question is basically like, did they do the right call on PlayStation? Because I don't know the PlayStation numbers off the top of my head. But if it's doing this well on Steam, then in theory, they could have had similar sales on PlayStation. But for the company that produced it, I'm sure going the route they did was the better call, because this has gone and overperformed dramatically compared to any other title the publisher has released. So I don't think there was any way they could have predicted it becoming as big as it seems to be for now.
And also too, I mean, I'd love to get like developer take on that too, of just again what that does to open doors. Then, if you're the developers of Stray, it might have a bit more carte blanche come to the table to design another game, regardless of how they go monetize it or not.
For sure. So, I mean, if you've played Stray or seen anything about it, do leave a comment with your thoughts and feelings on it. Do you think if you got it free on PlayStation, I'm particularly curious if that's why you got it, or if you would have been willing to pay for it, as many Steam people did, and what you think the future of the game may or may not be, because I expect there to be more support for it. I expect there to be DLCs. It's a smash hit for the studio, best they've ever done, so it'd be crazy on their part to not give this some love and some more attention in the future.
But I mean, speaking of kind of living as a cat and the idea of
what a transition, existence. Living as a cat.
HBO has a documentary coming out saying we met in virtual reality, based on VR chat, and I guess following the lives, I'm not sure of how many folks. It would look like maybe at least a dozen, maybe a half dozen, that literally basically lived their lives, met their significant others, teach, work, live, play in virtual reality. Trailer just dropped. Again, we met in virtual reality is the name of the documentary. HBO, what's your take?
So it's very interesting for me in a couple ways, because on the one hand, this is absolutely, I think, looking at the whole situation with rose-colored glasses, right? Like, this is really looking at what virtual reality could be. The trailer talks about people who can't see each other in person for various reasons. Distance separates them, so this lets them spend time together. It talks about, virtual learning and stuff like that, and learning sign language in virtual reality, for example. And it really is, I think, focusing on the positive potential of VR and what that could look like as VR becomes more and more common. And it doesn't at all look at the issues like we've talked about on the show before of like metaverse and everything else, and like what can happen in a virtual world where laws and things aren't the same and not enforced the same way that they are in person, and then you're still just as emotionally invested in that character, that avatar, in those relationships and those connections. Like, I don't know. On the one hand, I guess I think it's good to get the good PR, because I believe it's important for people to understand like where VR is going and understand why this matters, because I know I've had those fights with my family, right? Like, I've been on, raid nights with my people, or I've been doing D&D nights or something online, and had to explain to my family or whomever of like, hey, this is my version of social interaction. Like, I know it's not what you imagine. I'm not going out to a bar or bowling or whatever and meeting people in person, but like, this is me getting together with 5 to 10 people, talking, hanging, chilling, having a good time, sharing an activity, so in that sense, I look forward to it. But then I almost am concerned of like, is this presenting too positive a look at it without considering the very real concerns, I think, around VR? I don't know if that's a fair take.
No, it absolutely is. And again, I'm not, we saw a minute trailer, so I would hope they show some of the darker sides of that for sure. But it does seem to kind of hint at just this alternative way to kind of get around distance, or kind of your alter ego avatar. And I guess the closest I can surmise it to is the kind of the furry culture.
Yeah,
and the idea that like you might be introvert, and then once you put on a mask or a costume, like you become an extrovert and you're confident. You feel more yourself, and you outgoing and more accepting and all that, and just confidence. It's all it comes down to, and it seems like it's hinting more at that. And speaking of toxicity as well, I mean, I would say furries are probably the most inclusive. Like, being in Pittsburgh for as long as I was, and seeing that convention, Antrocon, like, it was always blast. Like, those guys is, some of it's kind of weird, the litter boxes and shit. It goes crazy, but like very inclusive and like genuinely happy and accepting people. That it really is if you ever go there, it's a tough thing not to just kind of fall in love with it. Again, it's just all nerdy shit. It's video games, comic books, D&D, board games, and that's it. And just some people being costumes or not. But I do feel the VR movie seems to be hinting at that, which I think will be good, bring some good conversations in. But then, yeah, it's like, how much of a pitfall would there be? Misunderstanding of how dangerous VR could still be. And I will also say, if Ugandan Knuckles is not at all represented in VR chat in this documentary, I will be very,
Oh
very
Lord.
upset.
Oh Lord. No, and it like for anyone who hasn't seen the trailer, I think it's worth a look, and I'm very curious to see what it actually looks like because the trailer, you're right, like the range of avatars that you can create seems to be very impressive. I don't have familiarity with the actual program VR chat, but the range of avatars seems very impressive, and they go from like full body anthropomorphization that you're human and only like your basic arrangement, right? Standing on two legs and that's about it, right? To cat girls with just the ears and the tail kind of deal, and then there's like a hot dog in there and a gremlin, I think, or and you know what I mean? Like it gets very interesting, and I guess the question then becomes as well, like how do they deal with these topics if they deal with them directly? Because for those who are uninformed, could look at this very easily and be like, you know, this is just some, you know, there's that weird shit and like people going off and divorce from reality and alter egos and like I can see that narrative developing as well because what the trailer shows is a lot of, you know, non-standard avatars in terms of what we would expect for someone to look like in person. So overall, I think it's a very intriguing movie. I think I do want to ask though, what do you think is the future of VR societally speaking? Like VR gaming obviously is becoming more and more popular just because of the immersive experience and what that can accomplish. But we're also, I think, seeing, as this documentary seems to look at, VR becoming in some ways part of the social fabric for some people in kind of like their day-to-day life. And I'm
Yeah, I mean,
curious where you see that going.
I think we're getting like closer to it in some ways. I think the metaverse, we'll see what Epic does, and then Meta, Facebook's rebranding, how they navigate that. And we've definitely thought about some concerns on the show regarding that. Yeah, I don't know. I have my thoughts about it because it's like I don't, you know, even when we do a podcast and, you know, nature of my work, it's like I'm online all the time and like I'm way more integrated than not. But like I do think there's value of getting outside and talking and seeing people face to face. And I don't know how comfortable I am like promoting that notion of like it's okay to kind of just be inside all day and like have your online avatars. And the more access we have to that, I think people become hermits and more inclusive. And I think you also I think it forces you to basically lose good communication empathy skills. But again, this movie though seems to be showing a lot of empathy though too. So maybe I'm wrong.
It's a very interesting question, and I think it's one that I would love to explore further and discuss further. But that's probably a conversation for a later time because we are running a little bit long for what we usually do here on Spectator Mode. So anything you're looking forward to with Nintendo releases, if they move into movies and TV shows, what Nintendo might be cooking up for their future console, if this relates to that at all, which, you know, maybe is a stretch on my part, but I think there's potential there. VR and the future of that in the world, and, you know, your take on anything else we talked about, including Last of Us Remake again, whether that's a cash grab attempt or if there's a sincere, you know, attempt here to just update the graphics and stuff and just bring it to a new generation, as it were. As always, please leave your comments, and happy to hear from you. And this is another episode of Spectator Mode.